look at all that money, yeah, the money that they spend. Take another look now and take some time for hemp. Don't cut trees for paper, cause it hurts the environment. Stop deforestation, yeah, it's time for hemp. Whoa, an acre of hemp makes 20 barrels of oil. No need for pesticides to poison all our soil. People got no food, they got no clothes, they got no rest. Well, right now it's time for hemp.
I'm your host, Casper Leach. On the program today, we have a fantastic guest. He's one of my heroes. He's written a fabulous book called The Last Free Man in America Meets the Synthetic Subversion, and his name is Gatewood, Galbraith. Gatewood, I want to thank you for taking a moment of your life to talk to my audience.
Casper Leach, talk about heroes. It's a mutual feeling, brother. I've known your efforts in the hemp and the cannabis effort for now on to 20 years now, and you've broken new ground and set some standards, and I'm glad to see you back in action. And I visited your website the other day and was extremely impressed. And I just want to tell you that anybody who's listening to this has obviously already gone through that site, but they ought to tell all their friends about it because it is a very well done site that ought to educate a lot of people who need to be educated.
Well, thank you for saying so, Gatewood. It means a lot coming from you.
Well, I've been out there, at it for, as you know, since 1976, when I wrote the first the plan for legal marijuana in Kentucky and the rest of the states, where I tried to set out who should be able to grow this plant for profit and why. Where it went over to the small farmers and kept the big corporations out of it and got it out into the hands of the people who needed it and revitalize the agrarian economy in not only Kentucky but a lot of other southern states. And as we worked on that, became aware of hemp, cannabis as its cultivation for hemp, and of course, following our great leader Jack Hare and all his seminal work and effort, one of the real geniuses of this past generation, by the way. Once he opened the door to all this knowledge and all the rest of the smart people started adding to it, well, we discover all of a sudden that hemp, cannabis as an industrial textile crop is the answer to a tremendous number of things, in addition to cannabis as a medicine being the answer to the medical problems we have. So then, we get down, we find a smoking gun and find the real reason why this cannabis plant is illegalized, both in its medicinal and its industrial textile properties. And that is, not only is it the number one medicine on earth, and the pharmaceutical companies want to keep it illegal so they can have a monopoly on medicine, but it turns out that hemp is petroleum. That everything that you make out of petroleum, that you can make out of hemp. And, there's so many people never get it reduced to that simple phrase, and it boggles the mind when you think that everything that you make out of oil, everything that you make out of all these barrels of oil that we're spending $140 per barrel on, is exactly what you get out of the hemp plant when you reduce it down to methanol. And so, when you find out this information in the pursuit of wanting to be informed about it, then all of a sudden you just become an activist, as you know. I mean, I know that you got filled with the same kind of outrage at the way that this plant was being vilified and the people who were associated with it were being criminalized, that you decided to put your own fate out there in the public and on the air and try to get the truth out. And, of course, that's what we've been doing all these years. And, it's nice to join forces with somebody. You can be in my foxhole anytime, Casper Leach, in this battle over humankind's relationship with the natural cycle.
Well, thank you, Gatewood. And that's one of the reasons why I called you today and wanted to have this conversation, because you're a very learned individual when it comes to this particular aspect of this plant. You put together a thing called the Feasibility Project, the Marijuana Feasibility Project, way back, I can't remember when, about talking about using this plant for a cash crop and using it for fuel. Now, As I look through today's headlines, I'm frustrated, and I look at today's generation, I'm saddened, because they are looking at a whole new world that's totally different than you and I came through, Gatewood. They are looking at $4, $5, $6, $7 a gallon of gas coming down their pike. We got the cost of fuel hitting every aspect of our society.
But you know what's most frustrating about all this, brother?
What?
Everybody saw this coming. People saw this coming. When I ran, as many of your listeners don't know, is that I've run for office in the state of Kentucky. I ran for governor and I ran for commissioner of agriculture on this very plan back in 1983. In 1991, I ran for governor and gave a speech to the Kentucky Press Association telling them about biofuels and about the alternative fuels in the future and the necessity of our preparing for this very thing. Willie Nelson and I poured hemp oil into my Mercedes diesel in 1991 and drove it across Kentucky in my bid for governor. The first time any automobile had been powered by hemp oil on the roads of Kentucky and roads of America in 60 years. And I still love the fact that we made both the front page and back page of the High Times magazine in January of '91. But, you know, we were talking about it then. And I told the Press Association, I said, look, Kentucky is a very poor state, a poor, mountainous, agrarian state. We need hemp. Hemp was our number one crop for over 100 years. We were the world's largest producer of hemp. We're well suited for hemp. We're going to go to a biofuel at some point in the future. Let us position Kentucky to take advantage of the transition and see if we can't recapture an agrarian economy where our poor and small towns can have a viable economy again. I pleaded with them and prayed for them to do that, but they turned a deaf ear because the special interests don't want to see this happen. Those special interests are the ones who are making the money off the monopoly that they have on energy and medicine in this country today. And, so it's not as if that's the most frustrating thing. It's not as if this caught us by surprise. We saw it coming. You saw it coming. The people in the cannabis movement saw it coming a long time ago. But because we associate it with this plant, the status quo and the people who own the media try to cast us as some sort of stoned-out hippie brigade, when in fact we are the environmentalists, we are the natural medicine and herbal medicine contingent, and we don't trust the synthetic variety of what we used to be able to produce from the natural cycle, which is the reason why my book is The Last Free Man in America Meets the Synthetic Subversion, because everything that made America great, the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and independence and privacy and sovereign choice making, and it all has been under attack. And the cutting edge has been the war on drugs, and the cutting edge of the war on drugs is vilifying everybody who has an association with a green natural plant. Well, you talk about New Age thinking and talking about our children not being able to enjoy the same freedoms that we enjoyed growing up, Casper. When they've got parents ready to send their children to jail over their association with the green natural plant, they've already destroyed the family structure and initiated the New World Order on us. Here's how big it is. And by the way, I just saw a graph today on the production of hemp as an energy crop compared to ethanol, corn, and the rest of those things. And it turns out you use as much energy producing ethanol from an acre of corn as you get from it, whereas with hemp you get multitudes of energy from putting very little into acquiring it. But here it is. In 1980, I remember Liam Nielsen's study that said that if we planted 6% of the U.S. agricultural land in hemp, we wouldn't have to import another drop of oil. 6% of U.S. agricultural land in hemp. Now, that's more than that already set aside in the soil banks. And when you use hemp as it, you can use marginal land. You don't need to use flat land. You don't need to use herbicides, pesticides, and fertilizer to grow it, so that you're not taking away anything from the flat land foodstuffs, so that food prices can remain the same because their food is not being converted over into energy for the automobiles. But in fact, on the marginal lands and in the soil banks, we're raising the hell out of hemp, converting it to methanol. Now, why isn't that being done? For a couple of reasons. The biggest reason is that the DEA refuses to allow the permits to be let for the growing of hemp as a fuel crop. The DEA keeps saying that they can't tell the difference between a hemp crop and a marijuana crop for smoking, which is pure and utter balderdash. Anybody, the the difference. I mean, hemp and marijuana are both members of the cannabis family, but anybody who can't tell the difference, it's like Danny DeVito and Dennis Rodman both being part of adult males. If you can't tell the difference, they share the common experience of being adult males, like the hemp and marijuana share cannabis. But if you can't tell the difference in descriptions of them, you don't belong in law enforcement. And so that we have to, so that the DEA is acting as the muscle, as the vicious, underhanded, corrupt muscle for the pharmaceutical companies and the petrochemical companies, because they don't want the farmer regaining the niche in energy and medicine by growing this one single plant. They're willing to put millions of us in jail. They're willing to kill people. Obviously, they're willing to kill people to keep a monopoly in production of energy in this country. And, they have shut it down and gotten parents, turned parents against children and children against children and friends, and they developed a snitch system that would make the Russian KGB proud. They've just turned America on its head. And for somebody who loves the Constitution and wants to protect the constitutional rights that lots of people fought and died for, it sickens me to have our current elected representatives happily dissipate the Constitution while they line their own pockets with special interest money. Remember, even Jesus got pissed. Even Jesus failed to turn the other cheek when he took that whip and beat those son of bitches and money changers in the temple.
You're not kidding.
Even if I was Jesus, I'd be pissed over these people.
and his dad, Jesus' dad, what's his name? God, is the biggest marijuana producer grower in history. So anytime Jesus or God returns back to America, we're going to have to arrest them. I think in America they've grown enough plants where they can be given life sentence and be put to death, right?
I'd love to get in God's stash. Come to think of it, I have.
Yeah, I've smoked with Jack Hare too. Now, Gatewood, we know that we've heard this for years and years. Remember during the Carter administration, we had the gas shortages, and we had to turn our thermostats down, and he put on a sweater and talked about the economy by the fireside there, and then we had Nixon made the comment that, and he said in 1970 that we were importing 20% of our oil, and that by 1980 we would be importing 0%, even though that by 1991 we were actually importing 42%, and now, Gatewood, we import over 70% of our oil into this country from outside sources.
It seems to me like they're trying to make America a third world country, and these oil companies are as much to blame. These are your transnational companies. People have to realize that, people say, Galbraith, you keep talking about a conspiracy. You keep talking about the pharmaceutical companies and the petrochemical companies conspiring, and so I said, look, I finally identified the people that are the cause of all this, and I said it 10 years ago, and the same people are the cause of it now. They're the petrochemical, pharmaceutical, military, industrial, transnational, corporate, fascist, elite son of a bitches, who have never said, many of them are setting policy on economy in the United States of America and on our citizens' rights. They're setting policy, even though many of them have never said the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America or to the republic for which it stands. And they're not warm and fuzzy about us or our children or our grandchildren or our rights or our individual sovereignty. They have one allegiance, that is the corporate bottom line, and they view the Constitution and the Bill of Rights as impediments to the implementation of a new world order and global economy. And they're going to do everything that they can to remove those kinds of privileges, constitutional rights and privileges which we as citizens of the United States enjoy, because they get in the way of establishing some sort of routine and some sort of uniformity on the planet as a whole, where they can go about implanting their monopolies in the production and distribution of the vital necessities of the human race. It's socialism, it's communism, and it is an absolute enemy of the constitutional form of government of which I am so proud. Before the Constitution came about, everybody was chattel. Everybody was property. Before the Constitution came about, your rights as a human being were not recognized.
That's right.
The king or the queen or anybody, whoever the biggest warlord with the most gunpowder in the region, could have you hauled in front of him, set off with your head, and off came your head. Nobody could do a thing about it. But, it was only us, our founding fathers, who put together a constitution that officially recognized the sovereignty of every individual. The Declaration of Independence spelled it out. We hold these truths to be self-evident, all men created equal and entitled to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. So that was the first time that was ever recognized, and it was the first time it was ever recognized as distinct and apart from what the government would give you. And that's what sovereignty is, that our founding fathers recognized self-rule in people, and it officially put it together in the form of a constitution, which was meant to stifle government and ensure the individual freedoms of all the individuals. So before the Constitution came about, everybody was property. It was only the Constitution which formed a government that recognized people's sovereignty and the right to self-rule. And these people, these one-worlders, they cannot afford to give that kind of latitude to all the rest of the people on the planet. They can't afford to give everybody due process. They can't afford to give everybody official advocacy or official representation in the form of public defenders. So they're going to get rid of what makes the United States special, because this constitutional form of government just gets in the way. It gives people all these rights and everything. And that just, we can't be having that. So what I am, Casper, and what I encourage everybody to be, is a constitutionalist, a defender of the American way of life and a constitutional form of government, and to realize that this war on drugs and this war against a green natural plant is totally unconstitutional. It makes a mockery of the idea that you as an individual have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. If you had the right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, everybody would have a marijuana plant growing in their firebox.
Yes, they would.
Because it's nature's way of saying, hi, here's your life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness.
Well, that, and it's also nature's way of saying, here, let me help provide for the human race, because it makes over 50,000 different products that are now being made out of petroleum, that if we're being made out of this plant, we give America an edge on the open market, and we give us a more durable product for us to use here at home and create jobs. Now, Gatewood, it's important that the people who are listening to this really understand how this would turn our economy around. What would happen if we woke up tomorrow morning, every state in the union was not only allowed to grow it for medical reasons like they are in New Mexico, they're growing it down there for their patients, but was now actually letting farmers grow it like they did when they put out the film Hemp for Victory during World War II.
As I said earlier, 6% of the U.S. agricultural land in hemp wouldn't have to import another drop of oil. Now, I don't know how many acres that is, but I do know this. If they allowed Kentucky to grow hemp again, it would add, I would estimate, $3 to $4 billion worth of agrarian economy to this state, and of course that has a ripple effect. Because here's the way this works now. Before the synthetic subversion took place, we used to produce everything from the land. And when land is used as a means of producing wealth, then even the sharecropper and the fellow who has the hoe, the tenant farmer, has a little piece of the action. And the money flows from the land up through the little village, into the town, into the city, into the metropolis, into the big city. And the money flows back down through the metropolis, through the little village, and back down to the farmer, and back down to the tenant farmer. And that's the agrarian economy. That allowed these small towns to grow up and have open shops on Main Street, and have theaters going, and have a clothes store there, and a drug store, and that's what the small town economy was all about. That was when land was the means of producing wealth. When the synthetic subversion took place back in 1937, when they outlawed hemp as a crop and began dictating to farmers what plants they could put in the ground, what seed they could put in the ground, and what they couldn't, when they did that, they cut off the agrarian economy. And now that since land is not means of producing wealth, it's factories that are. And, one person can control a factory where they can't control 100 farms. They can control a factory. And so they've knocked those 100 farms out of economic competition with them. And so the small towns dried up. And that's why you go to a small town today, half the stores are empty storefronts because land is no longer a means of producing wealth. So by putting land back as a means of producing wealth, you could get that flow of capital going back up through the small towns, into the villages, into the big cities, and back down to the land. And the ripple effect of it would be enormous, not only in Kentucky, but throughout the entire Southland. I mean, you could absolutely revitalize the economics of Southland. Now, let's take a look at this, too. At some time or another, we're going to get off, I see, burning all kinds of liquid fuel, even biofuel. They're going to go over to hydrogen, they're going to go to electric, and they're going to go to those kinds of things. The fact is, hemp still has a major role because hemp is petroleum. For all us non-scientific folks, and I was one of those for many years and still am, here's the way this stuff works. The reason that hemp is petroleum, and if you don't remember one other thing walking away from what we're talking about, if you've sat through the whole damn thing, are these three words. Hemp is petroleum. Everything you make out of petroleum, you can make out of hemp. Now think about that. We're spending $145 a barrel right now for 55-gallon barrels of hemp, or of oil. That could be hemp oil that we could be getting from down to the local store. And here's how it works. All petroleum is liquefied vegetative matter that was grown eons ago and trapped and stored the sun's energy through its growing period through a process called photosynthesis. We all remember that from high school. That's the sun's energy flowing through the plant. All we're running around on in our cars today are the sun's energy that was trapped and stored by plants that grew thousands of years ago and were turned into liquid by nature or compacted into coal and peat, and that's what we're burning in furnaces, that energy, that sun's energy. Hemp, cannabis that's grown in an industrial textile fashion, hemp is the most effective photosynthesizing biomass on the planet. It more readily traps and stores the sun's energy than any other growing thing on the planet, and in more places around the planet. So that if you're going to go to biofuel in any respect, for any reason, not only cars, but for furnaces, for lighting, for paper, for a lot of other reasons, then hemp is the crop. It is the one that we can get out in the fields and have more farmers grow it quicker and more profusively and more professionally than any other plant in whose direction we're looking for an answer. Hemp has been proven to be time after time. Other countries are already taking advantage of it, and it just burns me up that these corrupt SOBs up here in the elected offices are protecting the petrochemical pharmaceutical industries by jailing us and keeping the farmer from competing in the energy and fuel market.
Yeah, we got people saying, let's do wind farming. It's the next wave of the future. It's the only way we can have windmills across the United States. We can harness the wind and generate enough energy for cities to light up and to use natural gas to run our cars. No one is saying hemp, in spite of the urgent need to find a solution to this crisis.
It's our job to educate. You know, we're not going to change the world, but we might educate somebody who can be able to reach the DEA and let our farmers make some money. This is a farming question. This is an agrarian question. And then it is the way to disperse wealth back to the people who actually need it, the poor folks living out in the rural communities who can no longer make a decent living from the land.
All right, and if they were listening right now, make a quick case as to all the aspects that relegalizing hemp as a cash crop and for paper, fiber, and fuel would do just quickly in the different industries and in our economy so that they recognize that we're very serious. So, I mean, if they're completely ignorant to it, let's give them one quick hit, Gatewood.
Well, look, consider all the plastics. Consider how many plastic things there are out there. Consider all the synthetic products that are made from oil. Consider all the foods and all the fertilizer and all the plastics and all the medical things and the cooking utensils and all of those things that are currently made from petroleum. More than 50,000 products made from petroleum could be made from hemp, which is the present day manifestation of petroleum. Except we're not using carbon fossil fuel. Petroleum is fossil fuel. Hemp is an annual renewable resource. It's sustainable development, and it does not put carbon fossils into the air. So not only from a product presentation of the need to return to hemp, but from an environmental standpoint, we need to have sustainable development, and if we're going to be burning any kind of fuel in order to get that sustainable development, it ought to be hemp instead of petroleum. Look at the market in petroleum today, trillions of dollars. That money could be flowing back into America, which would give the buying power back to the general public. It would give the ability for people to buy that car and make payment, be current in their house payments, to have some sort of house, to have some sort of health insurance, to be able to eat decent food. I mean, all of that is in great peril today. And it's not only the production of products, but it's all the ripple effect of the economy that would come back if, in fact, land was returned as a means of producing wealth, because land is a natural wealth-spreading mechanism. And if we were making the products from what came from the land, it would spread wealth in every aspect of society. It would flow through the entire system and take the monopoly and the super wealth away from the robber barons and return not only economic pride and self-sustenance back to the people, but also a pride and a feeling that, hey, being American is special, and, we're on the right side of being American instead of the losing side. This myth of the ever-expanding economy is only that, a myth. It's just all numbers games to these people. The whole basis of everything is to be happy and smell the roses and, to be content with your life. I give a talk to a sociology class at the University of Cincinnati every year, and the professor said, he said, I've got several colleagues and friends and who enjoy marijuana, but the one thing I recognize when they smoke marijuana is it goes directly to the amotivational syndrome part of their brain. And I said, okay, now let me get this straight. I said, you are criticizing it because it makes people happy and content to be where they are. I thought that was what we were all trying for, is to be happy with where we are. I mean, do you think that they ought to be enrolling in a class someplace in order to get a more advanced degree? And the fact that they're happy with where they are and they stop to smell the roses because they smoke marijuana, do you think it's a bad thing? Tell me what's bad about that. Tell me what's bad about being content. What's bad about being happy as sitting in a rocking chair and talking to your family and spending time there? I mean, what should we all be doing out there, building faster cars or, what is that we should be doing besides being content and happy? So when they say, it goes to the motivational system, I said, well, what's wrong with stopping to smell the roses? I thought that's what all that poetry and all that, be sure and dance when you get the chance and eat ice cream. I thought that's what that was all about.
I see, and people now think that this is like a new idea, too, sometimes when we talk about it. I'm always amazed at the number of people who've not heard the truth about marijuana, i.e. cannabis, hemp, paper, fiber, fuel. Henry Ford knew back in the day that we were going to need some kind of alternate fuel and even created a car called the hemp car.
I never heard of Henry Ford, Casper. I mean, they had the people, the 13, 15, 18, 19, 20-year-olds, they never heard, they never heard of any of this stuff. It's not being taught to them anywhere. They have no way of knowing this because the educational system is totally barren of all this. And, so they had to find out on their own. And that's why, we have to keep saying the same things over and over again. Hemp is petroleum. We got to say that every year because there's a whole new generation of people every year coming out of schools who never heard it before. And so, it amazes me too, brother. But that was like the girl said, do you mean Paul McCartney was in a band before Wings? And a lot of people out there don't even know who Paul McCartney is, for God's sake, or who Wings was.
Exactly.
We're old fogies, brother.
We are.
Fogies. By God, I cantankerous old fogey.
Well, people are still going to say, well, we got corn, we got windmill power, we have, we can build gigantic centers that can harvest all kinds of nuclear energy and atomic energy, and we don't need this plant.
We need an answer right away. Look, Kentucky was the world's largest producer of hemp for over 100 years. When we got out into World War II, we reinstituted growing hemp in the state of Kentucky because it was the quickest wartime crop that would provide us with our oil and our gasoline and our motor lubrication oil. I mean, so it is an immediate answer. We could be in production of fuel off of this within 12 months' time. Within the first growing season, we could be having immense amounts of oil within the second growing season, we could triple that. And so it's not, hey, we need to get the building code going. We need to find out where the best place to put it is. Any of that stuff. I mean, this stuff is already all laid out. There's no new chemistry that needs to be done. There's no new processes or patents or anything else that needs to be done. And the ways to burn it and the ways to truck it to where it gets burned are already set up. You don't have to build any power stations or anything to collect it. And so, no, this is we could be in production on this within the next 12 months and have a significant impact on oil importation within the next 18 months. So that's pretty damn quick. And it needs to be done in conjunction with everything else. There is no one single answer. There are like, for instance, small waterfalls and small mills out there, water mills where that can convert electricity and, light a few homes in a valley or something. So there's probably 1,000 small independent energy projects that produce enough electricity for a few homes or for a small city. And those kinds of things ought to be taken a look at and nurtured and cultivated. But it ought to be a multi-task approach to it.
This would be a big significance in our economy. This would turn jobs around. This would make our economy within 18 months actually free of an addiction to fossil fuels, or at least to imports. What would it actually take? An act of Congress, a stroke of a pen, a revolution? Somebody would...
The DEA start granting permits or turning it over to the states, either making a states' rights question and let each individual state do it, or to enact a federal program, much as they did during World War II, and have the DEA issue the permits. And let's face it, if you're growing industrial hemp for fuel, you've got a huge number of plants. They're growing very close to each other. They got very tall stalks and very few leaves. It's very easy to distinguish a hemp plant being grown for industrial textile uses from a cannabis plant being grown for smoking or medicinal uses. So that it's not they don't have to create any kind of new plants or paint them gray or green or whatever. All that's already set up.
Gatewood, is that not right? We can make a real difference as a collective whole?
I mean, look, it's just amazing what even a small group of dedicated people can do. As a matter of fact, on my bulletin board, it says that never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever does. Margaret Mead. That's a famous one from Margaret Mead. The question of individual freedom in this country is represented by the cannabis question. People's association with a green natural plant represents the question of whether we live in a free land or that we don't. And it is a question that cannot be ignored because there's a great deal of pain and suffering being inflicted upon the people because other people of goodwill are standing idly by. Don't stand idly by. Educate yourself about this issue and take the government off the back of the people and save your sons and daughters from ignominious treatment by people who don't give a damn about the Constitution. Brother, I've got to run.
Gatewood, I want to thank you for being a patient guest with me on the show today here at Time for Hemp. My audience learns from you every time you sit down and take time for hemp. And
okay. Take care of yourself and God bless you all.
Thank you. And remember, the next time you hear me, you'll know that it's time for hemp.
Look at all that money, yeah, the money that they spent. Take another look and take some time for hemp. Don't cut trees for paper, 'cause it hurts the environment. Stop deforestation, yeah, it's time for hemp. Grow an acre of hemp makes 20 barrels of oil. Need for pesticides to poison all our soil. People got no food, they got no clothes, they got no rent. Well, it's time for hemp. Throughout Earth's history, hemp's been used, no mystery. Hemp is legal to pay your taxes for more than a century. Check your faxes, the founding fathers made sense to me. It's time to grow hemp legally. It's time to grow hemp legally. Time to grow hemp legally. Think of all the uses. It's money that's well spent. Right now, no excuses, it's time for hemp. Sustainable green industry, that's our intent. A better place this world will be, it's time for hemp. Fuel and food and clothes and soap, housing, cars, yeah, cars, no joke. Henry Ford built a car of hemp. It's time for us to do it again. People be employed, balanced farming as it's meant. Right now, it's time for hemp. Hemp is the first necessity of wealth and protection of the country. Words of Jefferson Thomas. He grew hemp, why not us? It's time to lift the hemp ban. It's time to lift the hemp ban. Yes, we can. Yes, we can. You can make a difference. Yes, we can. Yes, we can. Look at all that money. Yeah, the money that they spent. Take another look and take some time for hemp. Don't cut trees for paper, cause it hurts the environment. Stop deforestation, yeah, it's time for hemp. Whoa, an acre of hemp makes 20 barrels of oil. No need for pesticides to poison all our soil. People got no food, they got no clothes, they got no rent. Well, it's time for hemp. Yeah.
I'm a believer. I'm a believer in global warming, and my record is good on the subject. But my subject is national security. We have to get off of oil purchased from the enemy. I'm talking about OPEC oil. And let me take you back 100 years to 1912. You're probably thinking that was my birth year. It wasn't. It was 1928. But go back to 1912, 100 years ago, and look at that point what our country was faced with. It's the same energy question that you're looking at today, but it's different sources of fuel. 100 years ago, we were looking at coal, of course, and we were looking at whale oil, and we were looking at crude oil. At that point, we were looking for a fuel that was cleaner, it was cheaper, and it wasn't ours, though. It was theirs. So at that point, 1912, we selected crude oil over whale oil and some more coal. But as we moved on to the period now, 100 years later, we're back really at another decision point. What is the decision point? It's what we're going to use in the future. So from here, it's pretty clear to me we would prefer to have cleaner, cheaper, domestic hours. And we have that. We have that, which is natural gas. So here you are that the cost of all this to the world is 89 million barrels of oil, give or take a few barrels every day. And the cost annually is $3 trillion. And $1 trillion of that goes to OPEC. That has got to be stopped. Now, if you look at the cost of OPEC, it cost $7 trillion. On the Milken Institute study last year, $7 trillion since 1976 is what we've paid for oil from OPEC. Now, that includes the cost of military and the cost of the fuel, both. But it's the greatest transfer of wealth, the greatest transfer of wealth from one group to another in the history of mankind. And it continues. Now, when you look at where is the transfer of wealth, you can see here that we have the eras going into the Mideast and away from us. And with that, we have found ourselves to be the world's policemen. We're policing the world, and how are we doing that? I know the response to this. I would bet there aren't 10% of you in the room that know how many aircraft carriers there are in the world. Raise your hand if you think you know. There are 12. One is under construction by the Chinese, and the other 11 belong to us. Why do we have 11 aircraft carriers? Do we have a corner on the market? Are we smarter than anybody else? I'm not sure. If you look at where they're located, and on this slide, it's the red blobs on there. There are 5 that are operating in the Mideast, and the rest of them are in the United States. They just move back to the Mideast, and those come back. So it's actually the most of the 11 we have are tied up in the Mideast. Why? Why are they in the Mideast? They're there to control, keep the shipping lanes open, and make oil available. And the United States uses about 20 million barrels a day, which is about 25% of all the oil used every day in the world. And we're doing it with 4% of the population. Somehow that doesn't seem right. That's not sustainable. So where do we go from here? Does that continue? Yes, it's going to continue. The slide you're looking at here is 1990 to 2040. Over that period, you are going to double your demand. And when you look at what we're using the oil for, 70% of it is used for transportation fuel. So when somebody says, let's go more nuclear, let's go wind, let's go solar, fine. I'm for anything American. But if you're going to do anything about the dependency on foreign oil, you have to address transportation. So here we are using 20 million barrels a day, producing 8, importing 12, and from the 12, 5 comes from OPEC. When you look at the biggest user, the second largest user, we use 20 million barrels, and the Chinese use 10. The Chinese have a little bit better plan, or they have a plan. We have no plan. In the history of America, we've never had an energy plan. We don't even realize the resources that we have available to us. If you take the last 10 years and bring forward, you transferred to OPEC $1 trillion. If you go forward the next 10 years and cap the price of oil at $100 a barrel, you will pay $2.2 trillion. That's not sustainable either. But the days of cheap oil are over. They're over. They make it very clear to you, the Saudis do. They have to have $94 a barrel to make their social commitments. Now, I have people in Washington last week told me, said, the Saudis can produce the oil for $5 a barrel. That has nothing to do with it. It's what they have to pay for. It's what we are going to pay for oil. There is no free market for oil. The oil is priced off the margin, and the OPEC nations are the ones that price the oil. So where are we headed from here? We're headed to natural gas. Natural gas will do everything we want it to do. It's 130 octane fuel. It's 25% cleaner than oil. It's ours. We have an abundance of it, and it does not require refinery. It comes out of the ground at 130 octane, run it through a separator, and you're ready to use it. It's going to be very simple for us to use. It's going to be simple to accomplish this. You're going to find, and I'll tell you in just a minute what you're looking for to make it happen. But here you can look at the list. Natural gas will fit all of those. It will replace or be able to be used for that. It's for power generation, transportation, it's peaking fuel. It's all of those. Do we have enough natural gas? Look at the bar on the left. It's 24 trillion is what we use a year. And go forward, and the estimates that you have from the EIA and on to the industry estimates, the industry knows what they're talking about. we've got 4,000 trillion cubic feet of natural gas that's available to us. How does that translate to barrels of oil equivalent? It would be 3 times what the Saudis claim they have. And they claim they have 250 billion barrels of oil, which I do not believe. I think it's probably 175 billion barrels. But anyway, whether they say they're right or whatever, we have plenty of natural gas. So I have tried to target on where we use the natural gas. And where I've targeted is on the heavy-duty trucks. There are 8 million of them. You take the 8 million trucks, and these are 18-wheelers, and take them to natural gas, reduce carbon by 30%, it is cheaper, and it will cut our imports 3 million barrels. So you will cut 60% off of OPEC with 8 million trucks. There are 250 million vehicles in America. So what you have is natural gas is the bridge fuel, is the way I see it. I don't have to worry about the bridge to where at my age. That's your concern. But when you look at the natural gas we have, it could very well be the bridge to natural gas because you have plenty of natural gas. But as I said, I'm for anything American. Now let me take you, I've been a realist. I went from theorist early to realist. I'm back to theorist again. If you look at the world, you have methane hydrates in the ocean around every continent. And here you can see methane, if that's the way you're going to go, that there's plenty of methane. Natural gas are interchangeable. But if you decide that you're going to use the methane, now I'm gone, so it's up to you. But we do have plenty of methane hydrates. So I think I've made my point that we have to get on our own resources in America. If we do, we can cut out, it's costing us $1 billion a day for oil. And we have no energy plan. So there's nothing going on that impresses me in Washington on that plan other than I'm trying to focus on that 8 million 18-wheelers. If we could do that, I think we would take our first step to an energy plan. If we did, we could see that our own resources are easier to use than anybody can imagine. Thank you.
Thanks. So from your point of view, you had this great Pickens plan that was based on wind energy, and you abandoned it basically because the economics changed. What happened?
I lost $150 million. That'll make you abandon something. No, what happened to us, Chris, is that power is it's priced off the margin. And so the margin is natural gas. And at the time I went into the wind business, natural gas was $9. Today it's $2.40. You cannot do a wind deal under $6 an MCF.
So what happened was that we through increased ability to use fracking technology, the calculated reserves of natural gas kind of exploded and the price plummeted, which made wind uncompetitive. In a nutshell, that's what happened.
That's what happened. We found out that we could go to the source rock, which were the Carboniferous shales in the basins. First one was Barnett Shale in Texas, and then the Marcellus up in the northeast across New York, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Haynesville, and Louisiana. This stuff is everywhere. We are overwhelmed with natural gas.
And now you're a big investor in that,
yes,
and in bringing that to market.
Well, you say a big investor. It's my life. I'm a geologist, got out of school in 1951, and I've been in the industry my entire life. Now, I do own stocks that I'm not a big natural gas producer. Somebody the other day said I was second largest natural gas producer in the United States. Don't I wish? But no, I'm not. I own stocks. But I also am in the fueling business.
But natural gas is a fossil fuel. You burn it, you release CO2. So you believe in the threat of climate change. Why doesn't that prospect concern you?
Well, you're going to have to use something. What do you have to replace it?
Well, the issue... The argument that it's a bridge fuel makes sense because the amount of CO2 per unit of energy is lower than oil and coal, correct? And so everyone can be at least happy to see a shift from coal or oil to natural gas. But if that's it, and that becomes the reason that renewables don't get invested in, then long-term we're screwed anyway, right?
Well, I'm not ready to give up, but Jim and I talked there as he left, and I said, how do you feel about natural gas? And he said, well, it's a bridge fuel, is what it is. And I said, bridge to what? Where are we headed? See, but again, I told you, I don't have to worry with that.
I don't think that's right, Boone. I think you're a person who believes in your legacy. You've made the money you need. You're one of the few people in a position to really swing the debate. Do you support the idea of some kind of carbon, some kind of price on carbon? Does that make sense?
I don't like that because it ends up the government is going to run the program, and I can tell you it'll be a failure. The government is not successful on these things. They just aren't. I mean, it's a bad deal. Look at Solyndra or whatever it was. I mean, that was told to be a bad idea 10 times. They went ahead and did it anyway. But that only blew out 500 million. I think it's closer to $1 billion. But Chris, I think where we headed, I mean, the long term, I don't mind going back to nuclear. And I can tell you what the last page of the report that'll take them 5 years to write will be. 1, don't build a reformer on a fault. Number 1. 2, do not build a reformer on the ocean. And now I think reformers are safe. Move them inland and on very stable, ground, and build the reformers. There isn't anything wrong with it. You're going to have energy. There is no question. You can't. Okay.
So one of the questions from the audience is with fracking in the natural gas process, what about the problem of methane leaking from that? Methane being a worse global warming gas than CO2. Is that a concern?
Fracking?
Yeah.
What is fracking?
Fracking.
I'm teasing.
We've got a little bit of accent incompatibility here, you know.
No, let me tell you. I told you what my age was. I got out of school in 51. I witnessed my first frack job at Border, Texas in 1953. Fracking came out in 47. And don't believe for a minute when our president gets up there and says the Department of Energy 30 years ago developed fracking. I don't know what in the hell he's talking about. I mean, seriously, the Department of Energy did not have anything to do with fracking. The first frack job was in 47. I saw my first one, 53. I fracked over 3,000 wells in my life. Never had a problem with messing up an aquifer or anything else. Now, the largest aquifer in North America is from Midland, Texas to the South Dakota border across 8 states. Big aquifer. Ogallala, Triassic age. There have been 800,000 wells fracked in Oklahoma, Texas, Kansas in that aquifer. There's no problems. I don't understand why the media is focused on eastern Pennsylvania.
All right. So you don't support a carbon tax of any kind or a price on carbon. Your picture then, I guess, that as how the world eventually gets off fossil fuels is through innovation, ultimately, that will someday make solar and nuclear cost competitive.
Solar and wind, Jim and I agreed on that in 13 seconds, that it's going to be a small part because you can't rely on it.
So how does the world get off
fossil fuels? How do we get
there?
Yeah. Well, you're going to we have so much natural gas, a day will not come where you say, well, let's don't use that anymore. You'll keep using it. It is the cleanest of all. And if you look at California, they use 2,500 buses, LAMTA, have been on natural gas for 25 years. The Fort Worth T has been on for 25 years. Why? Air quality was the reason they used natural gas and got away from diesel. Why are all the trash trucks today in Southern California on natural gas? It's because of air quality. I know what you're telling me, and I'm not disagreeing with you. How in the hell can we get off the natural gas at some point? And I say that is your problem.
All right. So it's the bridge fuel. What is at the other end of that bridge is for this audience to figure out. If someone comes to you with a plan that really looks like it might be part of the solution, are you ready to invest in those technologies, even if they aren't maximized for profits? They might be maximized for the future health of the planet?
I lost $150 million on the wind. Okay, yeah, sure. I'm game for it because again, I'm trying to get energy solved for America. And anything American will work for me.
Boone, I really, really appreciate you coming here, engaging in this conversation. I think there's a lot of people who want to engage with you, and that was a real gift you gave this audience. Thank you so much.
You bet. Good. Thank you.
Look at all that money, yeah, the money that they spend. Take another look and spend some time for him. Don't cut trees for paper, cause it hurts the environment. Stop deforestation, yes, it's time for him. Whoa, an acre of hemp makes 20 bales of oil. No need for pesticides to poison all our soil. People got no food, they got no clothes, they got no rent. Well, time for help! Yeah!
You are listening to the Time for Hemp Global Broadcasting Network. The only broadcasting network dedicated to ending the global war on drugs on iHeartRadio.